Hello Oracle folks, this is Justin, and in this Oracle YouTube video tutorial I am going to show you how to create an Oracle database using the DBCA. Now, there's also a YouTube video out on mine out on YouTube which shows you how to create a database the manual way, or the geek way I call it, my preferred way, using just to create database command manually via the SQL plus CLI Oracle command line interface. That is the preferred method of myself and many DBAs out there. But I just wanted to make you aware that there is also a GUI, graphical user interface tool, that you can use to create your Oracle databases. And the one for Oracle is called the DBCA, which stands for Database Configuration Assistant. Again, that's DBCA, Database Configuration Assistant. Now, when you install the Oracle database software into the Oracle Home, there is a subdirectory under Oracle Home called bin, where all the executables, and that's bin, B-I-N, where all the executables of that Oracle installation are stored. And in that Oracle Home bin directory is where these GUI tools, the graphical user interface window tools, are that I'm referring to. Now, they are all configured, they are all written in the Java programming language, which means, and the reason why they did that is so that they are have a consistent look and feel across platforms. Platforms being Microsoft Windows, like the one you'll see in this video, or Linux, Unix, and what have you. They may be launched differently or kept in different locations, but they all look the same basically once you're in them. So, on this Windows box, let's go to the Oracle location, the Oracle Home, where we installed our Oracle database software, which is Oracle App Product 1110 DB1. So again, that's c:/oracle/app/product/11.1.0/db1. And let's go to the bin directory where all the executables are kept. And there are two sorry. DBCA. There are two scripts here, batch files, which launch the GUIs that I'm referring to. One is called a DBCA, Database Configuration Assistant, and there's also one called NetCA, which is Network Configuration Assistant. And the reason why I'm mentioning the NetCA GUI utility is because we need to create a default database listener in order to run and use the DBCA to create our database. So that's a prereq. So to create our listener on our Oracles, and a listener runs on the Oracle server, and it accepts connections on a default TCP/IP port 1521. Again, that's 1521, and connections from client sessions, from Oracle client connections. Okay. So, to launch our NetCA, which is a requirement for DBCA, we type in the following: NetCA, and Oracle Net Services Configuration. And these tools could also be found on the Windows box, and on a Windows system. If you go to Start, you click on your Start button, and you go Program Files, and then there's Oracle has a folder under program files that you can launch these from as well. Okay, first screen in the NetCA here. And by the way, you can also create your own listener file, listener.org configuration file, manually. You don't have to use this wizard, which I'll show you after this is done. Okay, it says, welcome to the Oracle Net Configuration Assistant. This tool will take you through the common configuration steps listed below. Now, we want to pick listener configuration. For remote connections to be made to your Oracle database, you must configure Oracle Net Listener. The Oracle Net Configuration Assistant allows you to add, reconfigure, rename, or delete a listener. Select what you want to do. We want to add. For remote connections to be made to your Oracle database, you must have at least one Oracle Net Listener. Enter the name of the listener you want to create. Listener is fine. That'll be the default listener name. Now, if you had multiple databases running on the system, I would change the name to be DB1, DB2, or Finance 1, Finance 2, and I'll run an example or whatnot, because each database will have to listen on a different port. Okay? but we only have one database running on the system that we're going to really worry about, so we'll just listeners fine. You can configure the listener to accept connections over one or more protocols. These are networking protocols it's referring to. Select which protocols you want to configure for this listener. Keep your configuration as simple as possible by configuring only the protocols you need. Boy, I agree with that. So TCP for which will be used with IP for TCP/IP is what we're going to use here. Which TCP/IP port number should the listener use? The port number selected should not be used by any other software on this computer. Use the standard port number 1521. And that's what we were talking about before, that the default port for Oracle database connections are 1521. That's the default TCP/IP port which the Oracle database listener listens for Oracle client connections on. Click Next. Would you like to configure another listener? No. Next. It does its thing. Give it a few seconds here, and it says listener configuration completed. Woohoo! Okay, we hit finish to get out, and here's the information that was spit out on the Java console while we were running the GUI. It says OracleNet services configuration, configuring listener, the name of it listener configuration complete, OracleNet listener startup, run listener control, done. Okay, so it started the listener as well as it created it as well as restarted it. And if you go to Oracle Home, by default, Oracle Home, which is /Oracle App Product 1110DB_1 on this system, and then under Oracle Home you go to subdirectory network, and then subdirectory admin, so that's Oracle Home Network Admin. You will see that a file was just created called listener.ora. And we'll take a look at that file here. You will see that this is what the DBCA created. This is the file, and this is the contents of the file. This is your database listener configuration file, and I do have videos detailing the listener and the TNS names configuration files and how that they're done in more detail. But this is the basic configuration, listener configuration file. Okay, now you could have manually typed all this in if you have templates on your computer that you just cut and paste in the files and then change the names, like I usually do when I'm out in the field and creating listeners for people. Or you can just run the DBCA. Okay, now the DBCA may not always be an option. In Windows it usually is, but it may not always be an option on Unix and Linux systems due to X-window configurations. If you don't know what X-windows are, talk to a Unix admin or just ask me in a comment or an email and I can explain more. Okay, so you may have to manually configure this file in a Windows, in a Unix or Linux environment, but in a Windows environment you should be able to do this GUI that we just used. And the GUI did create this, but again you could have manually put this stuff in the file and started the listener. Okay. And as you can see, the after it configured the it created a listener. Listener configuration complete. A few lines down, it says that it used this command in bin, Oracle Home bin, listener control, that stands for LSNRCTL, start, and then listener. Okay, now we can run our DBCA to create our database. So we launch DBCA, Database Configuration Assistant, which should launch the GUI tool provided by Oracle, which will allow us to create our database. An alternative to using the geek way, which is via SQL Plus and the create database command. Now note that this GUI is issuing a create database command under the covers, so let's keep that in mind. Okay, Database Configuration Assistant. Welcome to Database Configuration Assistant for Oracle Database. The Database Configuration Assistant enables you to create a database, configure database options in an existing database, delete a database, and manage database templates. Next. Select an option you want to perform. We're only going to do the first one here, but you can create a database, you can configure additional database options, you can remove a database, which is like a drop in a database, manage templates, or configure automatic storage management. We want to create a database, so we select that tab, that radio button, we hit next. Templates that include data files contain pre-created databases. They allow you to create new databases in minutes as opposed to an hour or more. Use templates without data files only when necessary, such as when you need to change attributes like block size, which cannot be altered after database creation. Okay, there are small compressed Oracle databases that come installed with the Oracle database software, which are called templates, pre-configured, pre-created templates, which allow you to just create databases automatically. There are two types of databases. There are general purpose or transaction processing databases, which are known as OLTP databases. Again, that's OLTP. That stands for Online Transaction Processing Databases. Again, that's Online Transaction Processing Databases. And there are also data warehouse databases known as DSS, Decision Support Systems. Again, that's data warehouse databases are also known as DSS, data decision support systems, and they're for long-term storage of data and whatnot. Okay, but in this example, we're just going to say we just want to create a custom database. Okay, we don't know exactly what we want to do, and if you do show details, it will show you based on the type of database you want to create. In our world, in our example, a custom database. The details tab will bring up a window to show you what's going to be installed. The Oracle JVM, text, XML database, multimedia, OLAP, Sparta, label security, blah 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 blah. Initialization parameters, here they all are. As you can see, it does a lot of this for you. It's really nice. Character sets, control files. So this is all, and table spaces, and data files, and redo log groups, and it even has the sizes here. So these are all what you'll need to get a database going. Now this is nice because if you were to select DSS, Decision Support Data Warehouse database that you want to create, or an OLTP, Online Transaction Processing database you want to create, it will select the options which you need to run that type of database. It will configure a lot of parameters and a lot of performance parameters to make those more to make those environments run more efficiently, depending on what you want to run, the character sets you will need, and everything else. So and the size of the data files, table spaces and data files and redo log files you will need. So it's a good starting point, which is pretty cool. You should still hire a database if you're not a size and a capacity expert or a performance expert. Hire a database performance expert architect to come in and more tailored to your situation and the servers that you're running on and the hardware you're using and the platforms, operating systems you're running on, really help you design your database, and they can become familiar with your application and your business processes and things like that. But this is always a good starting point. Okay, and Oracle tries to help you there. So we're going to say customize database next. It says an Oracle database is uniquely identified by a global database name, typically of the form name.domain. Now it's asking for a global database name. And then underneath it says a database is referenced by at least one Oracle instance which is uniquely identified from any other instance on this computer by an Oracle System Identifier, SID. Oracle_SID. You'll see me use that in almost all the videos on YouTube. So we want to call this database Finance2. And the global name is usually identical to the SID. Oops, sorry. We'll do 3. Okay, and this will allow us to do different things. Like we can also configure Enterprise Manager right after we configure a database, which I don't want to do in this example. And all of these other options here, because they grayed out, when I grayed that out, pertain to Enterprise Manager. And Enterprise Manager is another GUI and a framework really called Grid Computing, which allows you to manage Oracle database server farms from one central point location, i.e. a web interface, and allows you to tie multiple Oracle databases, regardless of what platform they run on in your environment, to one management location. I have videos on that as well. For security reasons, you must specify passwords for the following user accounts in the new database. Use different administrative passwords. Okay, use the same passwords for all accounts. So we're just going to pick Justin123 and Justin123. Now, obviously, in a real-world environment, I wouldn't use the same password for all accounts because once a hacker compromises one user account, they have what I call keys to the kingdom at that point, and they can do whatever they want. And I know customers that don't just do that within one database; they do that with all their databases. And I always tell people, you know, it's going to be a pain, but just create a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet or some kind of other documentation method. Document your passwords and protect that spreadsheet with an encrypted password of some sort, okay? And you know, and change them often. And it's a pain to have a different password, and it's tempted to use the same password everywhere. And I say that for the same to Unix people to Unix people out there. I tell them, you know, set your root passwords to different on every system. It's very tempted not to, okay, to set them all to be the same for ease of use, but there's always a handoff there with security and convenience, okay? And, you know, just double check. And if you do it this way, you may never be able to memorize them, but that may be a good thing. So always consider setting different passwords, not just per database, but per user account. Okay, next. Select the storage mechanism you would like to use. There are many different mechanisms you can use for storing your database files. File system, which are used in what we call in the Unix world cooked file systems. Use the file system or for database storage, and we use that in my YouTube examples. Basically, that's what C:/database or data, the database name is. Okay, it's on disk. Or automatic storage management, ASM, which is a feature that was introduced in Oracle version 10G, which includes an integrated file system created just for the Oracle database by Oracle Corporation and maintained and supported by Oracle Corporation. It's advanced, and I see ever since then I've been seeing that Oracle has been pushing customers towards that. Okay, to foster that, and again, the statements I make on these videos are my own. I don't represent, or I don't work for Oracle, nor do I represent Oracle in any way. Okay, so you know, there's my disclaimer. So don't say, well, Justin said, okay, because what I say really doesn't mean anything here. But I am hearing rumors that Oracle database version 12G, the next release, and this is 2011 we're in right now, Oracle database 12G will not support raw devices, okay, like raw logical volumes on your Linux and Unix environment. Okay, so that's just so the upcoming release, Oracle database version 12G, server version 12G, may not support raw devices, and I am just, from what I'm reading and talking to people out in the field, this is what I'm hearing. Okay, but again, I don't represent Oracle in any way. That's my disclaimer, and I don't know what I'm talking about as far as future plans go. Just something maybe keep in the back of your mind. Okay, so we're going to say file system. We say we want to put it on disk. Specify locations for the database files to be created. Okay, and we have a standard here in our videos. We want all of our database files to go to C:/database or data finance 3. So that's C:/database or data finance 3. If you want to specify different locations for any database files, pick any of the above options except the Oracle managed files, and use the storage page later to customize each file location. And I'll show you what that's all about. File location variables, and I'll show you what that means coming up. This is just how the DBCA does what it has to do to put your files on disk. Flash recovery area, I really don't use this yet. Maybe I should. I do have videos detailing it, but I don't. So I do understand it. I know how to set it up and use it, but I really haven't used it out in the field or really embraced it much. It's a feature which allows you to essentially manage and automatically manage, for Oracle to automatically manage all your files that have to do with recovery. So I won't get into detail with it now. You typically don't set it up in the field. Enable archiving. I say no there. I do that manually. Hit next. Select the components you want to configure for use in your database. Provide a table space in which you want the component to reside. Components which appear disabled or either not installed depend on the components which are selected. Okay, so there's way more areas here, options here, but here are the basic options, and most of them get installed in the sysaux table space. In versions prior to 10G, because the sysaux table space was introduced in version 10G, and database software version 10G and below, each of these versions had their own table space or tools table space or something. And starting in 10G, Oracle wanted to simplify everything and keep everything on one standard, additional features in one standard table space, and that table space was sysaux. But you can change that here. Okay. And this is just further where you want it to go. Some more configuration items here. Like I said, unless you really don't have to get into this that much. And here, unless you're really specific, some applications that use Oracle databases as a repository may require you to be very specific. Okay, the app vendor and the way they did, they may have good reasons for doing that. The way their application interacts with Oracle or runs, and you have to really assess each situation. Okay, and this right here allows us to set some size characteristics, the database block size, which cannot be changed after creating the database, by the way. Connection mode, dedicated server, which we talk about in other videos. Character set, which can be changed. You can change the character set of an Oracle database. Starting in 9i, they allowed you to do this, but it's it's quite a project, so beware of that. Okay, so hit next here. It says Oracle recommends using the enhanced default security features. Keep the enhanced 11G default security settings recommended. These settings include enabling auditing and new default password. Revert to this to disable. Okay, again, this may be because of application reasons. Again, this is per app vendor. A lot of application vendors use Oracle. Okay, so they may have a reason for using certain security features. They haven't put the support for the new 11G security features into their Java code or whatever they coded their application in yet. Okay, so you have to go back. But I typically want to keep enhanced 11G default security settings. Click next.